Moving walkways like at the airport, wooden instead of lattice doors. Church, football, culture. Cresti 2, prison in St. Petersburg, seems to offer luxuries to prisoners that are not available in other Russian prisons.
Living conditions here are really better than in other prisons.
But why has a new type of prison been built in Putin's Russia? A step towards a more humane penal system? Or can you still find the same hard discipline behind new modern walls? St. Petersburg, port city, shining metropolis on the Baltic Sea, and location of the most modern prison in Russia. Our editor Nico is given access here for a whole day and can look behind the almost 6-meter high walls. He wants to find out how the prisoners are really doing here. Guard Alexander will not leave Nico's side for the whole day. Just like the 5 other prison employees we are not allowed to show. At the entrance, our film team has to hand in their mobile phones and go through a meticulous security check.
Step through the scanner. Turn round. All right. Don't forget anything.
Our editor hasn't even arrived at the actual prison wing yet. At 30 hectares, the grounds are so extensive that visitors and staff use a quad bike to get to the inmates. Our first impression of the main wing, a lot of bars, just like any other prison. And Nico notices something about Warden Alexander.
Do you always wear a camera? It's a body camera. What for? It runs all the time, so we document everything that happens. Have you ever been in a dangerous situation? No, thank God.
We enter the actual cell wing. Warden Alexander wants to show us how the prisoners are housed here. On the way there, we come across something that is rather unusual for a prison.
It's like an international airport here.
Over 50 moving walkways are to make the eternally long distances more bearable for staff and prisoners, at least theoretically.
Unfortunately, the moving walkway doesn't work, so I think we've still got a bit of a walk ahead of us.
After a 15-minute walk, we arrive at a cell. This cell is supposed to be a standard throughout the prison. The 4 occupants share a room. Television sets are allowed here. Unlike in Germany, you are not even principally entitled to your own cell in Russia.
Yeah, I mean, the bars on the windows are not that cool, of course. But it's kind of like a dormitory in a youth hostel. Honestly, not as horrible as I would have imagined a Russian prison cell to be.
At least that is our impression. But what do the prisoners who really live here say about the circumstances? To find out, Nico meets with an inmate who has been assigned to us by the prison management.
Good afternoon. Hello. I'm Nico. Dennis.
Dennis Smagin is in prison for drug smuggling and has already served 3 or 4 years. Most of it at one of the older prisons.
As an inmate, you feel like a human being here. That's really something new.
Because in many old Russian prisons, there are still conditions similar to the Stalin era. And this is the infamous predecessor of the modern Cresti 2 prison, Cresti 1. Originally built for about 1,000 prisoners, more than 12,000 people lived here at times. 8 inmates and more crammed into a few square meters. On average, half a square meter per inmate. In Germany, the average is supposed to be 6 to 7. In the modern successor Cresti 2, it is 4.5. But have the conditions here improved in other respects as well? In Cresti 2, the facilities are much better. For example, modern heating and insulated windows for the cold Russian winter months.
Do the prisoners have telephones? No. That would be too much, right? Of course.
So, the conditions in the standard cells in Cresti 2 really seem to be a significant improvement over other prisons in Russia. But we don't know what the conditions in the cells for solitary confinement are like. We are not given access to those. Instead, they take us to a kind of social room. Supposedly, there are a lot of leisure activities here for the prisoners. For example, chess.
Most people here are doing this kind of thing for the first time in their lives. Playing chess, reading books, or drawing.
Drawing and painting, reading or learning an instrument. This serves the purpose of re-socialization and is also common in German prisons. In a giant Russian prison, we would not have expected such a versatile range of activities. The prisoners also work in the kitchen or hand out food here. This puts a little structure into their prison routine. It is said that the prisoners receive 70 euros per month, more than twice as much as in other Russian prisons for the same work. Denis worked as a lawyer before his imprisonment. Now he has a job as a prison postman. He distributes mail from family members to the inmates.
Relatives can send us food such as tea, sugar, sweets, or now in the summer fruit. Drugstore items such as shower gel and shaving foam are also allowed. Every day, relatives come to visit and bring such things.
Prisoners are allowed to receive up to 30 kilos of mail per month from their family members. Although the prisoners do not need this, it makes the time behind bars a little more pleasant. Despite everything, there is another side to this too. One that is unknown in German prisons, similar to a military drill. Daily exercise routines take place on the open-air grounds of the prison. The inmates must be in line within 5 minutes of the signal sounding. If they fail to do so, they may not take part in the recreational activities for a certain period of time. German prisons do not have this form of drill. In complete contrast, every Saturday, priest Alexander Suchov conducts a Russian Orthodox service for prisoners with religious beliefs.
The weekly service gives the prisoners the chance to reflect on the meaning of life and to question Western values.
Western values means everything that goes against Russian tradition. The inmates are presenting themselves as particularly conscious of tradition.
I get the feeling they're trying to show us their flagship prison from its best possible side.
We can't say how often there actually are cello concerts for the prisoners when there is no camera running. We get to see a small section of the gigantic complex. Seen from above, the prison has the shape of 2 crosses. Cresti means translated crosses. Just like its notorious predecessor Cresti 1, which has the same cross shape. But until last year, these wards were an expression of an inhumane penal system. Has this really changed with the new prison? The Russian lawyer Vera Goncharova represents convicts, prisoners and those released again, so she has access to first-hand information. In terms of living conditions, the new Cresti prison is a perfect example. But it is not enough to just improve the living conditions. The guards also have to treat the prisoners better. The harsh treatment of prisoners is a general problem in the Russian prison system, says the human rights activist. So, is much of Cresti 2 just for show after all? It is quite likely that when journalists or human rights organizations visit prisons, they only get to see them from their very best sides. Once they are gone, everything can look very different. Of course, we cannot conclusively examine what goes on behind these walls and bars when we have left with our camera. But what we do notice are the omnipresent surveillance systems. We do not get far with critical questions about invasions of privacy. From here we can also control the heating in the cells or make it warmer or colder.
You don't use this as a form of punishment, though, do you?
No, never. The living conditions the prisoners have here are really good. That is all we get to know. There are no reports from ex-prisoners about this prison yet, as it has only been occupied for 1 year. At least the equipment and the various facilities provided suggest an improvement in prison conditions. For example, the sports activities. Once a week, the prisoners can play football on the prison's own sports field. This allows them to stay fit and learn to treat each other fairly and respectfully. The same applies to the theatre group, which gives a performance once a month and on public holidays. Dennis also has a part in this play by Pushkin. It's a real benefit for him.
I'm very grateful to our director for not putting so much pressure on us and for giving us the opportunity to develop positively with such offers.
Next year, Dennis will be free again. He is no longer allowed to work as a lawyer. He then wants to start working in a friend's advertising agency. Our conclusion? Compared to the conditions in other Russian prisons, this is a significant improvement. But there's still a lot of hard drill and discipline which you won't find in German prisons. Though we were able to find out a lot, for us some doors still remained firmly closed.